Morning, accounting students. This is the first of a two-part video series on process costing. Okay, so where does process costing fall into? So if we're looking at the cost accounting side of the section, the cost accounting side is determining how much it costs to make us a cost object. So if that cost object is unique, we know that we use job costing. If, however, that cost object is mass produced, that's where process and then ultimately standard costing will come in. So we're looking at a mass produced product here, like for example, this pen. And so all we really need to do is know what the costs were and how many pens went through the production process, and we can get an average cost per pen. Sounds simple. Well, it is in principle. There's one or two important issues that we will need to look at. But however, in real life, it can get very complicated. We are only going to look at it using weighted average costing. You can do it on FIFO, you can do it on LIFO. We are going to ignore the fact that in production processes, many items are spoiled or lost or defective. We're going to completely ignore that. We're only going to look at one production process. Obviously, if you're making something like a calculator, there might be 20, 30 steps in that production process. And each of those would require a cost accounting process for them. So it does get more complicated, but we just want the basics. There will be a second video where we will look at a slightly more detailed example than this first one. Again, when you're doing process costing, you can do it however you want to. This is cost of management accounting. There's no rules that say you have to do it one particular way. I like to use Excel because I think it makes our lives simpler. So once we have gone through the first basic example, just using logic, we'll then go and redo it using a spreadsheet. And then there will be a second video looking at one of the examples in the notes. Business 240 students might not need that one, but business 28 students will need that one. Okay, so our first example written here on the board is we have this production process. We spend $75 on costs, 60 of which are for materials, and 15 of which are for what we call conversion costs. So conversion costs are your labor and your overhead costs associated with taking the plastic and turning it into a pen. Very first example, $75 our costs. We make 10 units. Easy. We know our costs. We know the number of pens that went through the process. So $75 divided by 10 units, we have $7.50 per unit. We have 10 units, so if you multiply that back by 10, you get back to the $75. Very important to reconcile back to your total costs into the production process. Next one, slightly more complicated, and this is the main issue you need to focus on and get out of process costing. So in this example, we make 10 units, but 5 are complete and 5 are half complete. In other words, they're only gone halfway through the production process. So if we want to work out a cost per unit, we know the costs going in. And let's talk about units. Well, there's 5 whole units, but there's also 5 half units. So if we take that out, we've got $75 divided by 5 whole and 5 half, which is 2.5 full units. The idea of converting partial units into whole units is what we call equivalent units. So we divide by 7.5 equivalent units and we get $10 a unit. Okay, that's different to what we got before. Let's see where those costs will go. Well, we've got 5 units that are completely complete. That gives us 50. And then we've got 5 units that are half complete, which gives us 2.5 equivalent units. That gives us 25. And we get back to our $75. Really important that we reconcile back. Okay. Now, next step. Okay, and this is where probably the most detail we expect you to know and think about in this particular process is that if I'm taking pens and I'm making them, now if the pens are 100% complete, I need all the materials. What happens if the pens are half made? How much materials do I need? Well, the answer is probably all the materials, because you can't make a pen without plastic and ink. So when it comes to looking at our cost per unit, it's useful to split out materials, and conversion costs. Because typically, most products, doesn't matter how far they are in the completion process, they have 100% of the materials and then a varying amount of their conversion costs. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our costs separately here. So we'll first look at materials. So we've got 5 units fully complete, 5 units half complete, but half complete with conversion, but 100% of their materials. So for materials, easy. We've got $60, we've got 5 units fully completed, and then we've got 5 units partially completed, but 100% complete with respect to the materials. So that's 10, 60 over 10 gives us $6 for materials per unit. Now we get to the conversion. Conversion costs were 15. And we've got 5 units fully complete, but then we've got 5 units that are half complete and probably got half their labor and conversion costs. So that gives us 2.5 equivalent units. So we've got 15 over 7.5, which gives us 2, which gives us a total of $8 for a fully completed unit. Remember, we need to go back and reconcile to our total. So we go and take our finished goods and we say we have got 5 of them at $8 a piece, $40. Let's look at our closing work in progress. For materials, they're fully complete. So they got $30. Well, what about their conversion? Well, for conversion, they were only half complete. So we got 2.5 equivalent units at $2, which gives us 5, gives us 35. If we add them both up together, gives us $75. Very important to reconcile back to our total costs in. Right, so personally, trying to do that, step by step is fine, but it's easy to get lost when we have more information, which is where the spreadsheet idea comes in. So in the spreadsheet, we're going to first look at the step 1 is physical units, and I'm going to have an in and an out column, and then details. So we may have opening work in progress, not in this particular example, but in other ones we could. In this case, there was nothing, but we did have input. We put in enough stuff, we put 10 units into production. So we know in total we got to deal with 10 units. That's the physical units we put into production. The question is, where did they end up? So the next step is where we look at where they end up. They could have ended up in finished goods. They could have ended up in closing work in progress. And then, even though in our course we won't be looking at this, they potentially could have ended up being lost, which we call spoilage. The lost units, the wasted units, the evaporated liquid, the defective units that we threw out are referred to as spoilage. We are going to be ignoring that because it adds a whole lot of complexity we don't really need to deal with. But we do need to look at the basic principle. So where did our units end up? We're looking at the part C here. 5 units are fully complete and 5 are half complete. So we have 5 in finished goods and 5 in closing work in progress. So step 1, balance the physical input to the physical output. Step 2, for the physical output, these two amounts, what are the equivalent units? So first we look at finished goods, and we'll have 2 columns here, materials conversion, and we say finished goods are 100% complete. So that's easy. 100% times 5 gives us 5, 100% times 5 gives us 5. No surprises there. But when it comes to our closing work in progress, we said that it had all of its materials 100%. So 100% times 5 gives us 5. But when it comes to conversion, because it was only halfway through the production process, it's only got 50% of its conversion costs. So 50% times the physical amount gives you 2.5. We can now add up and we get a total of our equivalent units for materials conversion. Okay. Now the next step is for our costs, to make sure we know what our costs are. In this case, there is no opening work in progress. There's only input. We have $75 of input, of which 60 is material, 15 is conversion. So our total is 75, 60, 15. In the next example that we'll be looking at, that some students might need to look at or refer to, there might be some opening costs. we would be putting them together and working out a weighted average. Again, FIFO, LIFO, way more complicated. So that's step number 3. Step number 1, physical units. Step number 2, equivalent units. Step number 3, cost totals. Step number 4 is to work out something they call the cost per equivalent unit. And here what we're doing is we're bringing down our costs, so our total costs, and then we're going to bring down our equivalent units, and we're bringing down the total, which is 10, 7.5. And if we add them out and multiply them out, we get 6 and 2, which is what we got over there. Okay. Finally, our last step is to say, well, what was this all about? We wanted to go and value our finished goods and our closing work in progress. So here what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going and taking the cost per equivalent unit, and now we're going to go multiply out by equivalent units. So what are we going to get out? Costs. You might say, well, that's a kind of a pointless process. Well, it's not, because over here we have cost per equivalent unit for total, and we have total equivalent units. But now we're going to go and do it separately for finished goods and separately for closing work in progress. So let's go and do it step by step. Finished goods. 5 physical units times 6 gives us 30. Conversion, 5 times 2 gives us 10. Now I'll do the same thing for closing work in progress. Here are units. So we got 5 times 6 gives us 30. Okay. And then we got 2.5 times 2. So 2.5 times 2 gives us 5. Add up, that gives us 15. Add up, that gives us 60. Add across, that gives us 35. Add across, that gives us 40. Add up, 75. Make sure the 15 and the 60 are equal to these two totals. Make sure the 75 is equal to that total. And we have done process costing. We have split the costs of $75 going in into closing work in progress and finished goods. Thank you. That's all on this one. As I said, there will be another video with a more detailed one from the pack of notes. Thank you.